For most people, alien abduction belongs to the realm of science fiction. But sometimes, a story emerges that seems so real, even seasoned investigators cannot explain this.
We pulled up and I noticed there was postage signs there. And I said, Charlie, you know, maybe we don't need to go fishing here. He said, no, that's fine. And that's when I noticed some blue hazy lights reflecting coming across from my back, out across the water. So I stood up thinking that I was going to go to jail.
Among these rare accounts, the experience of Carl Higdon stands out. He was a quiet Wyoming hunter whose encounter defies everything we've thought we knew about this world. But around that time, others reported similar impossible events. Carl Higdon Alien Abduction Story. Let's go back to late October 1974, when 40-year-old Carl Higdon, an oil driller from Wyoming, took the afternoon off to go elk hunting in the remote foothills of the Medicine Bow National Forest. What begins as a routine outing quickly becomes a story that you won't even expect. Carl's day followed a familiar pattern. He drove into the forest, parked his pickup, and headed quickly into the clearing. There, he spotted 5 elk standing motionless. He raised his new 7mm Magnum, squeezed the trigger, and nothing happened like he expected. He was shocked to realize that the rifle didn't make any sounds. The recoil was absent, and the bullet seemed to exit the barrel in slow motion. It traveled only about 50 feet before dropping into the snow. Even the forest felt eerily muted. That's when he noticed something surprising. There was a large, transparent, cube-shaped object, empty and hovering on the ground nearby. And approaching him, by gliding rather than walking, was a humanoid figure. It was about 6 feet, 2 inches tall, dressed in a black scuba-like suit, with straw-colored hair standing up in bunches, and antennae like rods on its head. It was nothing like he had ever seen before, and no one else has probably seen it. The being didn't have a chin or ears, but small, slanted ears. The being asked him telepathically, "Are you hungry?" It offered floating pills in a packet. Carl took it and swallowed it, but he felt like he was compelled because he wouldn't normally take such a thing. Then, the being identified itself as Also One and invited Carl to come aboard the transparent craft. One moment, he's standing in the forest. The next, he finds himself in a seat inside that cube, restrained, seeing his own pickup truck far below. The elk that were once in the clearing also appeared in the cage. Also One explained that they came from a world many light miles away, hunting animals and fish for food pills. Inside the craft, Carl was floating, and it seemed like he was traveling through space. It showed humans in a relaxed company under a tower of lights. Then came a chilling message. Also On actually told him, "You're not what we want. We'll take you back." And before he knew it, he was back on the side of a hill, hurting his shoulder and looking confused. When Carl returned, the search party found his truck 3 miles away from where he parked it. It was stuck in deep mud, with no tracks leading up to it. It was as if the vehicle had simply materialized. He was in a state of amnesia and couldn't recognize his wife. All he did was mutter words like, "They took my elk," and speak of floating pills and a strange being. They had to take him for medical tests, and experts were shocked at what they found. The previous lung scar tissue was gone, and his kidney stones, which had been there for a long time, simply disappeared. But despite his state of disarray, they didn't find any symptoms of a mental illness. It was clear that he was simply shaken off. He later calmed down and revealed the story of what he had witnessed and experienced. But that was not all for Carl. In the years that followed, he remained in telepathic contact with Also One, experiencing strange lights following him, and even sensed that he was being monitored. Even worse, His case was connected to missing persons cases which had been found in remote areas, and so many started to wonder whether those people were also abducted by aliens but couldn't expose the story. There was a lot of credibility to Carl Higdon's story. It had a witness who was sober and an outdoorsman, physical traces like the malformed bullet, and the truck which was found in a completely different way, and medical reports that scientists couldn't understand. Many began to wonder, if this man returned, how many didn't? This is one of the most convincing alien abduction stories out there. But he's not the only one to have this shocking experience. Travis Walton, another credible witness, was abducted for 5 days, and the evidence was overwhelming. Travis Walton. On the evening of November 5, 1975, in Apache Sitgreaves National Forest in Arizona, something shocking happened that changed the history of ufology. A logging crew of 7 men, after a long day at work, were driving back through the trees when a golden disc-shaped craft appeared. It hovered just 20 feet off the ground ahead of them. The craft would change one of the men's lives forever. Travis Walton, then 22, got out of the truck to examine what was in front of them. His co-workers could only watch in horror as a beam of bluish-green light shot from the craft and struck him in the chest. In Walton's own words, "All I felt was the numbing force of a blow that felt like a high-voltage electrocution. My mind sank quickly into unfeeling blackness." The men fled the scene in panic, assuming the beam had killed their friend. When they returned minutes later, the craft had instantly vanished. And to their surprise, so had Travis. Immediately, the co-workers contacted the police, and what followed was an intensive search, media attention, and mounting suspicion of foul play. Even his co-workers were investigated for murder. But 5 days later, they didn't believe what would happen. Travis literally appeared by a roadside near Heber, Arizona, shocked and claiming that he couldn't remember a lot of things. He said he had awakened inside the craft, where short beings and strange human-looking figures actually studied him. He remembered a Spartan room, a plastic mask placed over his face, and moments of unconsciousness. Time and again, Travis has maintained he wasn't abducted literally in the sense of confinement, but rather he was rescued. He believes he was mortally wounded by the beam, and these beings intervened to save him. What makes the Walton case even more dramatic yet credible is how many eyewitnesses and documents that were there. His 6 co-workers all tell the same story. They took polygraph tests, and there are records of the initial missing person investigation. But some skeptics say that there are some inconsistencies. One crew member confessed in a recorded phone call to participating in a hoax, although he later retracted it. Over the decades, Walton's has remained an important part of UFO lore. Walton himself admits that after 50 years of recounting the events, he's tired of being asked to prove it. He also said that if 7 people testified to a normal crime, people would believe it. But he is facing a lot of scrutiny because of the UFO claim despite all the evidence and witnesses. The abduction of Travis Walton remains one of the most documented and convincing alien abductions out there. But a few years after this happened, another alien abduction happened, this time with over 20 witnesses. Linda Napolitano.
I tried to wake my husband. Eyes still closed, and there was no response from my husband. And that's when I did open my eyes and I looked straight ahead. And there was this thing, this creature, standing at the foot of my bed. And it was the first time I had ever seen that consciously. I was awake. I hadn't gone to sleep yet. I was saying my prayers. So by this time, my legs were numb. And I sat up in bed, dragging my heavy legs with me, and turned up behind me and threw a pillow, big pillow, that I made, You would think that I stuffed them with rocks because it was heavy. And I hit him too, that creature. And my next conscious memory, fragmented memory, was seeing white fabric flow up and over my eyes and then down again. And then I felt something, perhaps little fists or maybe an instrument, pounding on my back. And that was all I remembered. And then my next conscious memory was that of falling into my bed. I could have fallen anywhere from 2 inches up or 2 feet up or whatever, but I was conscious and I felt myself fall into bed.
On the night of the 30th of November, 1989, in a quiet 12th floor apartment in Lower Manhattan, something shocking happened that left many scientists and ufologists surprised. Linda Napolitano, at home with her husband, woke up to something unsettling. She revealed that 3 non-human beings suddenly appeared before her. She says that they levitated her out of the window, up and over the city skyline, and into a craft floating above near the Brooklyn Bridge. The scene showed a beam of blue-white light, her body suspended in midair, and the concrete and glass cityscape beneath her. Once aboard the craft, Linda revealed that she endured a series of experiments that were chilling in their clinical nature. She said that the small gray beings and some human-looking observers probed her body, inserted instruments like a device in her nostril, and used telepathy and strange languages. Afterwards, she woke up in her bed, next to her husband, and she had no memory of how long she had been missing. But she discovered something shocking. There was a lump in her nose, pain, and odd sensations. An X-ray reportedly showed a foreign object, which later vanished when a specialist tried to remove it. This left only a ridge of cartilage in her nose. You might think it's unbelievable if you only have Linda's testimony, but she's not the only one that saw it. The alien abduction had around 20-plus eyewitnesses, including drivers, pedestrians, night workers near the bridge, and even security officers. Her key investigator, Bud Hopkins, revealed that 2 bodyguards passing by at that time had seen the levitation when she was lifted out of her house through the window, and wrote letters describing it. One of the men even claimed that the person they guarded, former Javier Perez de Cuellar, also saw the event. The fact that many people saw her being levitated makes the case stand out from normal abduction stories, but the story later became tangled in doubt. The witnesses were never publicly identified, and the influential figure, Perez de Cuellar, officially denied any involvement. It seemed more like they realized how significant the situation was and quickly had to cover it up. Skeptics also say that many of the letters were signed by Linda herself, and some handwriting experts said that the letters were copied. In 2024, Netflix released a 3-part docuseries titled The Manhattan Alien Abduction, which reopened the case to a new audience. Linda felt the series portrayed her unfairly and sued Netflix for defamation, claiming the editing made her look dishonest and misrepresented the narrative she agreed to share. She alleges that producers promised a sympathetic portrayal, but delivered something else. Whether you believe in aliens or not, Linda Napolitano's story remains one of the most convincing alien abduction claims, with many witnesses. After all, it would have been hard to miss a woman being levitated above Manhattan, floating in the city's skyline. Frederick Valentich. On the evening of 21st October, 1978, 20-year-old pilot Frederick Valentich departed from Moorabbin Airport in Victoria, Australia, flying a single-engine Cessna 182L toward King Island across the Bass Strait. His plan was routine, but what followed has become one of the most haunting mysteries of aviation history. Less than an hour into his flight, while over the sea at around 4,500 feet, Valentich contacted Melbourne Flight Service. He asked if any other aircraft were in his vicinity. He was told none were reported. Moments later, he described a strange aerial object. He said, "It seems to be orbiting on top of me. It's got a green light, and it's all shiny on the outside." It seemed like nothing at first, but there came the most chilling words, as he also said, "That strange aircraft is hovering on top of me again. It's hovering, and it's not an aircraft." A moment later, the radio open mic transmitted a metallic scraping noise for about 17 seconds, and then silence. Neither Valentich nor his plane were ever found, despite all the search efforts. As the hours passed, surface ships and aircraft, including the Royal Australian Air Force's P-3 Orion, swept the waters and coastlines around Cape Otway and King Island. Yet no wreckage, life vests, or hint of the aircraft ever emerged. Betty and Barney Hill Incident. On the night of September 19th to 20th, 1961, Betty and Barney Hill, a mild-mannered interracial couple driving through rural New Hampshire, encountered something that would change their lives and reshape UFO lore. While returning from a vacation, they noticed a bright object in the sky that behaved unlike any plane or satellite. What she first thought was a falling star moving upward, altered direction, and eventually hovered low above their car. Barney stepped out with binoculars and his pistol in his pocket, and watched a large, flat, pancake-shaped craft appear overhead. Through his binoculars, he claimed to see 8 to 11 humanoid figures peering out of the windows. One of the figures remained and uttered a telepathic message that said, "Stay where you are and keep looking." Terrified, Barney ran back to the car, and they sped away. Moments later, they heard rhythmic beeps, felt their vehicle vibrate, and a tingling sensation pass through their bodies. Then their memory went black. They realized they had traveled some 35 miles, but they couldn't remember anything. Once home, the strange aftermath continued. Betty found her dress torn and stained with a pink powder. Barney's shoes were scuffed deeply. Their watches stopped working. Haunted by vivid dreams and strange impulses, they eventually sought help from psychiatrist Dr. Benjamin Simon, who, under hypnosis, guided them to recall being taken aboard a spacecraft, separated and examined by non-human beings. Pascagoula Incident. On the night of 11 October 1973, 2 shipyard workers, Charles Hickson, who was 42, and Calvin Parker Jr. at age 19, went for a quiet fishing trip on a pier at the bank of the Pascagoula River in Mississippi. The air was still, the water dark, and it should have been an ordinary evening. But seconds after a strange whirring noise and the appearance of 2 blinking blue lights, they say their lives were changed forever. Hickson saw a large oval-shaped metallic craft hovering a few feet above the water. Meanwhile, Parker was paralyzed, and although he was aware, he couldn't move. Then 3 creatures emerged. They were about 5 feet tall, with grayish skin, no visible necks, slits for mouths, and peculiar pointed protrusions from where ears and noses would be. They say they were taken aboard the craft, examined in what felt like an alien medical chamber, and then returned to the same pier from which they'd been taken just minutes later in their own time. The local sheriff's office took the report seriously. Hickson and Parker passed polygraph tests and were recorded in the sheriff's station, apparently sincere and deeply shaken rather than seeking publicity. As the story spread, the city of Pascagoula later even installed a historical marker at the site of the alleged abduction, calling it one of the best documented of its kind. But, as you can expect, many people don't believe this because there was no wreckage or independent witnesses, and say it might be a misinterpretation or hallucination. Zanfretta UFO incident. Finally, there was another shocking alien abduction which happened in 1978. On a cold December evening, night watchman Pier Fortunato Zanfretta was doing his routine rounds in the hills near Torriglia, Italy, when nothing was ordinary. At around 11:30 p.m. on December 6th, he noticed strange lights dancing around a villa known as Casa Nostra. Convinced at first he was dealing with burglars, he stepped out of his patrol car and instead found himself face to face with something utterly different. Through the radio, he described that he could see a massive red oval craft resting in a garden, then colossal beings who were up to 3 meters tall, with mottled green skin, triangular yellow eyes, and claw-like feet came out. His radio crackled with his panicked cry as he said, "No, they're not men. They are not men." Shortly after, his colleagues found him disoriented, uniform torn, body unnaturally warm despite freezing night air. At the scene, investigators noted a semicircular impression in the grass, as if something heavy had landed. Over the next few years, Zanfretta claimed 11 separate abductions by the same beings which he called Dargos. They had allegedly told him they came from a dying planet in a far-off galaxy and were evaluating Earth for habitation. Under hypnosis, he described vivid aboard-ship scenes, cold medical instruments, a helmet placed on his head, strange lights, floating objects, and telepathic communication. The case drew major attention due to all the evidence and witness statements. The lights were seen that night by villagers, and Zanfretta's statements remain consistent. These convincing alien abduction stories remind you that there's something stranger and more interesting out there. Which of these do you think is the most convincing? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. So, thanks for watching this video, and we will see you in the next one.